Ever since Exploding Kittens blew up on Kickstarter in 2015, there's been a ton of these cat-themed games coming out over the years. Some of my favorites would include Cat Lady as well as The Isle of Cats, which are two very solid games. But I'm here to tell you that Calico is the new title holder for Best Cat Game out there. Now I know you're probably thinking, so what, Best Cat Game might not be saying all that much, but that's part of the reason why I hesitate to even refer to this as a cat game, because in general it's just a fantastic game regardless of the theme. Whether you're into the cat theme or not, it's undeniable the quality that's on display here in this game. So it's not a perfect game, and I will get to a couple criticisms later, but for now let's talk about what you're actually doing in Calico. Each player gets their own recessed, dual-layered player board, which represents a quilt. At the start of the game, you get 3 random goal tiles from a possible 6, and you place them in these 3 spots on your quilt. On your turn, you'll have 2 tiles in your hand. All you do is place 1 tile anywhere on your quilt, and then draw a new tile from the common supply of 3. Players take turns doing this until everyone's quilts are full and the game ends. Each tile has 2 features, a color, or a symbol displayed here for colorblind players, along with a pattern. Essentially, you're trying to place your tiles adjacent to your goal tiles to meet the indicated goals, while also chaining together tiles with either the same colors to score these 3-point buttons, or of the same patterns to attract cats to your quilt, which can often be the biggest ways to get you points. So then what does it actually feel like to play Calico? Well, even though the rules are fairly breezy and it moves along fairly quickly, this is ultimately a game of risk assessment, knowing when to cut your losses and knowing how far to gamble on something. Even the smallest opportunities for points in this game, which are usually the colored buttons, which gives you 3 points, usually involve connecting 3 colored tiles. So you're not just going to get 3 points by placing a single tile. Even the smallest, measliest little 3 points involve some sort of investment that you might not know that you're going to get the net result out of. At the same time, the higher point values, whether it's the goals that you have on your board or these cat objectives that you can go for that attract cats to your quilt, have an even longer investment. Sometimes you need to connect 5 or 7 tiles in a specific way. And when you're only holding 2 tiles in your hand, and you've got 3 in the common display that you're going to draw 1 from at the end of your turn, this quickly becomes a game of priorities, and you need to decide how much do you want to invest in trying to go for a particular goal somewhere, with knowing that you might still need 3, 4, 5 more tiles to see that through. And what if you get halfway through meeting this objective and you later realize that the tiles just aren't working out for you and you have to pivot? If you're a perfectionist, this type of game might drive you crazy, it might be frustrating, it might feel like you never can do quite what you want to do, but it doesn't quite have to be that way, and that's one of the best things about Calico, is the option of playing casually versus playing more intensely. This really is a game for just about anyone. Based on the playing time, the ease of rules, I mean, you can set this up, teach it, and play within an hour, and your brain is going to get a significant workout. Again, if you want it to. If you want to play it sitting back casually with someone where you're not really thinking a whole lot about your moves and just kind of enjoying watching your quilt develop, you can do that. But if you want to sit down and really go head to head with someone and you want to try and build this quilt in the perfect way you can and maximize your scoring, you really want to stress over those moves, you can do that as well. There's nothing that feels like it doesn't belong here. Everything feels well thought out, there's no bloat to the rules, there's nothing that feels like, oh, if they had cut this out, it would have been a little more accessible or a little more streamlined. Everything just feels well thought out. And I mean, look at the level of care that has just gone into everything, from the amazing artwork by Beth Sobel, not only on the cover, but I mean the player boards, all these pieces, the component quality of everything, these dual layered boards. The bang for your buck on this game is about as good as it gets in board gaming, to be honest with you. I think I got this brand new for about 32 bucks Canadian, and for that price, you usually don't find a game of this high quality in terms of the production as well as the game itself. So hats off to AEG and Flat Out for that. And it's exactly because of this level of polish and care from everyone involved in this project that it makes it so tough to find anything really wrong with the game. I do have one issue though. It's not a huge one, but I find that once you go above 2 players, the game doesn't get any better, I find. Adding a 3rd or 4th player, to me, reduces the player interaction rather than increasing it. And for me personally, when I'm really excited about a game and I want to show it to other people, the thought of playing with more players usually makes the game more interactive. Let me explain why this isn't the case for Calico. This is because when you play a 2-player game, the only interaction that's really coming into play in Calico in general has to do with the common supply of tiles that you'll be drawing from at the end of the turn. Maybe you don't need any of the 3 tiles in particular, so maybe you draw one that you know your opponent needs. In a 4-player game, though, you can't be drafting tiles off the front of the board denying 3 different people. If everyone else on their turn is just taking the tile that works best for them, but you're spending your turns trying to deny other players and you're not really getting what's best for you, you're going to quickly fall behind. So a 3 or 4-player game, there's a lot more emphasis on sort of just taking what works for you and getting the points where you can, not really worrying as much about the other players. So for me, when we're talking about player count, Calico unquestionably succeeds best as a solo or 2-player game. Personally, I think 2 players is where it's at. 3 players, still very good. 4 players, it's still great. It's still going to work really well, especially if you're playing with people who don't take too long on their turns, who don't suffer from too much that analysis paralysis. It'll still be smooth enough and enjoyable enough with 3 or 4. But personally, my player count of choice for this is going to be 2, and I find that anything above that, it becomes a little less interactive. Now I want to talk about one of the negatives that I've found other people have had with this game that I don't think is really a fair criticism. And that has to do with the randomness. I've seen people complain about the randomness of tiles, saying that, oh, you know, it can be unsatisfying if you don't get the tiles you need. But I'd like to explain why I don't think that's a fair enough criticism about the game, and to do that we're going to take a closer look at the player boards. So those 3 goal tiles I mentioned at the start are going to go in here in these 3 spots. So throughout the game, as you're drawing tiles, obviously you want to be trying to place them next to these goals to meet them. But I want you to take a look at something. Look at the surrounding spaces that actually go around the goal tiles. Here, here, and here. That leaves a few spaces on your board that aren't actually going to be adjacent to those tiles at all. If you look along the bottom, there's 3 here, there's a couple up here, and a couple over here. So you have these sort of, let's call them dead zones, where you can kind of store away these tiles. So if you have a hand of 2 tiles that don't work for you, you have this sort of economy, this sort of resource that you have to manage throughout the game. You almost have these 7 free spaces you can get rid of a tile without affecting your goals. So if a tile is either sort of good for you or not good at all, you can tuck that away, but that's a resource that you're essentially using up that you won't have access to as much of later. On the flip side, you have these goals. As I mentioned before, there are goals you can go for with these cats, where, for example, Leo rewards you for having 5 tiles of the same pattern in a straight line like this, and that's going to get you 11 points. When you look at your player board, you can see this pattern here and this pattern here. You can use this board, the border around the board, to actually connect for that goal. So you can fill in these 3 to get that goal of 5 instead of actually spending 5 tiles. So the depth of this game really comes out through all the spaces in their board, and I find that having the randomness of the tiles gives you more depth of strategy, because you have to figure out when to actually place those in the spots where you're committing to your goals, when you can tuck them away in the corners, but when you're also using those and they're going to maybe block other connections that you have across your borders. So everything really matters, and I find the randomness really just adds to the depth of strategy here rather than punishing. And really, we're all operating under the same level of luck in here, so I think it's perfect for Calico. So despite my minor criticism about the reduced player interaction at higher player counts, I do really like Calico. I think it's a fantastic game that works well with families, as well as more serious gamers who want to sit down and have a more competitive game night. I mean, really, it's one of those games that does a lot with a little. It's got simple rules, you can get it to the table very quickly, and yet it's going to put your brain through quite the workout. The other thing I want to point out is this is the first published design by Kevin Russ, and as far as debut games goes, this is about as good as it gets. This is just such a clean, polished design, and there's just so much to like about it. Yes, the game won't be for everyone, but if it's not for you, you probably know that. If you're looking for a very interactive, fighty game, or you're looking for some epic, long campaign game, you know this isn't for you. But if you're looking for this type of game, then the folks at Flatout and AEG have delivered on every front. Yes, it's the best cat game on the market, but honestly, to think of it as just another cat game would be a disservice to Calico. This wasn't a game that was made for cat lovers. This was a game that was made for board game lovers, and it just so happens that the cat theme is a nice added bonus for those of us who love cats. So, did the world need another cat-themed board game? Maybe not, but if they're all going to be this good, I'd say keep bringing them on. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you around.